Hello. Unitel this week presents University of Saskatchewan Drama Department. I'm Rosemary McSherry, and my guests in the studio this week are Dr. Daniel Nalbach, head of the Department of Drama, and Raymond Clark, professor of acting with the department. Dr. Nalbach, I think some of the viewers would be interested in finding out exactly what kind of program is offered and what kind of classes are offered at the department.
We teach drama in the liberal arts context, and we offer classes in all phases of the theater, in acting, in stagecraft, design, costuming, directing. We've instituted a couple of courses in new courses this year, one in puppetry and one in costuming for the theater. We have a course in theater history, because we want these students to know not only where theater is now, but where it has been, and to give them an idea of where it might be going in the future. We're not training specialists in any one particular area of the theater, but we want our graduates to know what the whole field of theater is about.
So it's a smattering of both the academic and productions.
Yes.
So
yes.
how
integrating the theory in the actual production.
So let's talk about how the two work together. Like for instance, in the shop, we have students building sets. So are they pretty well left on their own to build and mount productions as such?
No, the man helping this young lady is a technician with the department. He knows what he's doing, but she's having a little trouble learning the basics from what we can see here. Yes. Try it again. Yeah, that's it. And here's a more experienced person working the power tools in the shop. The settings are built by the students themselves. Many of them will be going out to schools where they will have to do almost everything themselves.
Raymond, perhaps you could say something about the masks that they're trying on here.
Yes, well, the masks that are being shown there are masks that were specially designed for a production of Edward Albee's Tiny Alice. Of course, every production has its special needs, and the good thing is that the students get an exposure to varieties of construction needs, like making masks, the problems of making the masks.
Here's a short clip of the noon show, some of the acting scenes going on. Dr. Nalbach, do the directing students usually take over the noon show as such?
Not always the directing students. Sometimes the students in the department run their own show. It might be a showcase for the acting class. It might be a showcase for the directing class. It might be somebody just who has a bit of energy in the department, and he grabs a few people together and trains some very beginning actors.
Raymond, perhaps you'd like to talk something about the voice classes we see here.
Yes, of course.
What kind of things you're trying?
Yeah, well, to acting, of course, there are many facets. It isn't just emotion that one is dealing with in acting. One is dealing with the techniques of acting, which is the use of the body and the development of the body and the development of the voice. This is a voice class where the students are taught how to hold their bodies in a correct way and how to re-educate, if you like, their bodies in a style of breathing that is useful for their work in theatre, and their speech is worked on and the range of their speech is worked on. Also, of course, the use of the body is very, very important. We tend not to use our bodies in our everyday lives very much, but on a stage where the whole of the body expresses an emotion, the body has to be flexible. It has to express both an emotion and age and lifestyle and all sorts of things. It has to be able to express tension or relaxation. And so the student in the acting field has to learn how to control his body, how to use the muscles of his body, so that he can use not only the space that's around him, but he can also use the areas that he has and the limbs that he has, and he really knows his body. We use a lot of dance because it's a very controlled form, so that while you're learning freedom, you're also learning discipline, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it isn't. I think that through the discipline you do learn to have the freedom, because as an actor, of course, you have to have a tremendous amount of discipline, physical discipline, as well as emotional and mental discipline. For a lot of students, of course, who've had very little exposure to dance, because we don't get a great deal of dance in Saskatchewan, this is something that's really new. And indeed, actually, the course itself is new this year.
And you're working with them in the class?
Yes, I take the class with them because I have appeared in plays here, and I also think that it's very necessary for me as an actor, and since I teach acting, to remain flexible myself. It's interesting working with the students, because if one's working in a class with them as opposed to just teaching them, one learns a whole different facet about them,
yeah,
which is good.
What kind of plays do you think are sort of suitable for university theatre? What kind of a program would you like to set up?
Well, when we select our season for the following year, we plan about 6 months ahead of time. We try to get a balanced season, of course, of modern plays and of established classics, and also a balance in serious plays and humorous plays, and also the plays which will give a large number of our students an opportunity to appear before the public. But we try to select plays that wouldn't ordinarily be done by other producing organizations within the community. For example, this year we did Tiny Alice, which is not an obscure Albee work, but certainly not one of his better known plays. And I was happy with Raymond's choice of that play for his preference of what he wanted to direct, because it is the kind of work we should be doing. We have a university community to serve, and we want to bring them plays which they wouldn't ordinarily get to see in the cinema or perhaps in the community theater. And certainly there wouldn't be a road show of Tiny Alice coming anywhere. So it's to service the community, the university community, and the community outside, too, that we and our students, that we select our season.
Raymond, were you pleased with the kind of things that happened and occurred with Tiny Alice?
Well, the production of Tiny Alice itself was an experiment. The reason that I chose it was because I had a sympathy for the play. I had a feeling for the play. But what I also, in consultation with Dr. Nalbach, I decided that I would like to use my advanced acting class and some of the experiments that we were carrying on in the acting class. So we've used a lot of the exercises and an approach to a role in the production of Tiny Alice. We've used the stuff that we have been working on in class. We've used a lot of body work, of exploration of space, exploration of audience-actor relationships. We've used really the kind of the nakedness of the actor, if you like. We have very minimal costumes in it, so that the actor has really had to kind of prove himself. We've used, as we saw earlier, we've used some of the masks. And it really, the whole thing, in this particular case, I've tied in very much to my senior acting class. I don't know that one would always do this. It's simply an experiment, and I think we're all of us quite pleased at how it's worked out.
Yes.
I think perhaps we should talk about exactly sort of what goes behind mounting a production, and not the kind of things like rehearsal as we see here with the Lysistrata, which has been being directed by Walter Mills.
Yes. Well, this is just gone into rehearsal. I'd say it went into rehearsal about 3 weeks ago.
And it'll be in the large theater.
And that will be in the large theater. Oh, this is from Tiny Alice. Is that a rehearsal?
No, that is an exercise that you're seeing there, which I simply use for concentration. The actors start in a kind of completely enclosed position, and when they feel that they've gathered their concentration, they start from their kind of nervous center energy and gradually grow up and out until they feel that they've pinned down their concentration. Because one of the things, of course, for an actor, the very important thing is, especially if you're working in the round, because we did Tiny Alice in the round, is that you have the audience around you the whole time. And so you have to be able to concentrate on the play and on your characterization, and that in itself is quite a difficult feat, and I think it's a thing that students have to learn. Some of the work here is just some of the examples of some of the body work we've done. We've used some acrobatics. We've been helped a lot by physical education department in this of helping to train the actors to be flexible. Theatre much more now is moving into the use of the body and the use of form and sound, and I think that this is something that again one can do in a university situation, is that one has indeed a responsibility and a duty to kind of develop and experiment.
From a director's point of view, what kind of dimensions can light and sound, offer you, or offer the production, or add to the production?
Well, I prefer to use sound as a comment upon the action, rather than, as it's done in the movies, to reinforce a mood. I mean, I usually use the sound as counter to what's going on, or as a comment, not as part of the action, but as a comment upon the action, as something. But directors vary. The approaches of the four active directors we have in the department are radically different from each other. Raymond might not use sound the same way. I think he did in Tiny Alice, but I don't think Walter Mills or Professor Jones does.
Really?
No, I mean, I think that my attitude towards it is that I really haven't sorted out in my own mind the technical things of theatre. I mean, that I don't know that I completely go for the dominance of technical aspects of theatre within theatre, because I wonder whether that might not be better done in film and television. I tend much more to go towards the idea, the writer, the audience relationship, and the actor. Simply, this is, I suppose you could say, this is simply where I'm at the moment, is of trying to explore what it is that theatre alone can do. But of course, we're all of us, as Dan said, we're all of us at different sort of stages, and we're all of us within the department. The exciting thing is, of course, that we're all of us in our own field creative, so that you have not only the academic aspect of us, but within each of us, within each of the faculty, there is the creative element. And there is the kind of the sparking off of ideas, the sparking off with the designer or with the other directors.
That's why it becomes sort of a great pleasure when you can take an idea and give it to your costume designer or your technical designer.
Yes, it's the sort of bouncing around of ideas, and very often, if you have an idea about a production, somebody will say something to you which will provide perhaps an insight, and because I don't think that one ever has a definitive idea about a production, certainly not at the early stages, and I think that one knows where one wants to go with it, but I think you're open to not to suggestion, but you're open to insights, I suppose. And this does happen within a drama department. I'm sure that it happens within the art department and the music as well. And then, of course, there is the stage of, you have to work in terms of the audience, so that at some stage you have to work in terms of presentation, and then you see what happens, and then we can all go back and we can talk about it. So it is a continually sort of growing and learning process, not only for us, I think, or not only for the students, but also for us.
I think that's part of the advantage of working in a university situation, where you can explore new things. We haven't stopped learning once we've gotten out of school, and we're just passing on what we've memorized in a particular class, but we're exploring new techniques, and we're learning and reevaluating and trying to formulate new concepts all along, and we're encouraging our students to do the same. And we learn sometimes from our students as much as from each other.
And within our department particularly, we have a very interesting situation, because we have some of the faculty who've come, like I myself, from a professional background and training, and those who have come from a much more academically oriented background, so that one gets a sort of cross-fertilization of ideas there, and we have people, in fact, who've come not just from Canada, but from various other countries. So, and it's surprising, theatre in other countries is different. I mean, no two theatres are the same. They may do the same plays, but the kind of the emotional stresses and balance within any kind of play are totally different. So there again, we get this marvellous sort of cross-fertilisation of ideas.
That's good. How long does a rehearsal usually run? Do you-
I go from 6 to 8 weeks, and Raymond goes from 3 to 5 months. It can vary, and directing approaches vary too. I myself have directed where I had every property present at the first rehearsal, and I've also directed where I haven't had every property there until the second night of performance. But so that, I mean, there are some directors who insist on full costuming by the first rehearsal, so the actors get used to playing in full costumes. Some directors want the actors not to work in a theatrical atmosphere until well into rehearsal. Others sit around a discussion table and discuss the roles with the actors for weeks. And it really varies with the individual director.
Yes.
And of course, the individual director, you know, you can direct one play one way and another play another way. It's simply really how the play strikes you and what the needs are within the play, I think. And always there's the fact that you have to develop the actors, and you just have to find the way of doing it. Some directors work through improvisation. For instance, with Tiny Alice, we did a lot of improvisation. We used a lot of theatre games. We used a lot of early sort of acrobatics and explorations of relationships and things like that. But one wouldn't necessarily, for instance, my next production is going to be Hamlet. One wouldn't necessarily approach Hamlet in the same kind of way because the problems are different in Hamlet. So it's that you must always, of course, remain flexible.
Well, I find from a student point of view that approaching each one differently, like working with you in Tiny Alice, was a very good experience for me because it was different than I'd ever done before, which was.
Well, I suppose that the nice thing about theatre is that there aren't any kind of hard and fast rules. There are certain things which work and certain things which don't work. There are certain techniques which work and certain techniques which don't work. But beyond that, it's very much a flexible thing. We don't have maybe the same problems that painters have. You know, we don't have the same kind of problems with only certain colours will go together to produce a third colour. You know, there's a much greater degree of possibility of shading, and of course, wherever you're playing a play makes a difference. I mean, how one would do a play in Saskatchewan wouldn't necessarily be how one would do a play in Toronto or Vancouver, because the emotional approach of people and their degree of exposure to theatre is different. So that affects your approach as a director.
Well, let's talk about Hamlet since it's coming up in March. Talk about your approach. How is it going to be?
Well, the great disadvantage with Hamlet for me is it's a play that I know very well. I've been in several productions of it. I've never played Hamlet and I've never directed Hamlet, but when one does know the play, that creates a problem for the director, as well as for the actor who's going to play Hamlet. It also, of course, creates a problem for the audience, because with a play like Hamlet, which everybody knows and everybody in Saskatchewan studied in grade 12, they tend to come with very strongly preconceived ideas. What we're trying to do with Hamlet is trying to rethink it and try and find the freshness that it must have had on the first day that it was presented. So that I think that what it's going to end up as, and I'm in very early stages with it at the moment, and one does try to remain as open as one can for as long as possible. What we have at the moment is the fact that it is going to be very much a point of view play. It won't necessarily be, I hope, a conventional production of Hamlet. Particularly, I hope that we'll have high school audiences who have the problem, of course, of tending to think of it just simply as a classroom piece. And what I would like them to be able to say is, good heavens, it's a play. You know, it actually means something to me. It's relevant to me. I think relevance is an overused word, but I think that it actually, it does actually work. I can go to it and I can be entertained. I can be challenged. But I don't necessarily disagree with it. It would be nice if the audience could come out actually saying, "No, I don't agree." Rather than saying, "Well, that was Hamlet, and that was an interesting performance by Hamlet." Well, that's another one on the list of ones we've seen on television or we've listened to on records. Yes. But it's actually somebody that you could say, "Yeah, I can sympathize with that guy," or "No, he's a fool." But somebody that you have a strong feeling about, and I think this is the way that we're trying to approach Hamlet at the moment.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that interests me is that I think that it's good that you're making the students, and speaking of myself in particular as well, stretch themselves to, you know, to the point where, you know, they're doing things that they've never done before and been challenged, as you are both being challenged.
Yes, well, of course, this is the only way that a student can grow. For instance, I know that I can talk from the point of view of the acting classes, that one tries as often as possible to cast the students against their type. You know, so that they learn other aspects of their performing abilities, so that even if they might not necessarily succeed, and they're only working in a laboratory situation as opposed to a full production situation, but in the classroom it's a laboratory situation, that they're having the chance to experiment, maybe fail, you know, that doesn't matter. I think it's good that if you fail, well, you fail and you learn by your failures, and you may fail grandly or you may fail, you know, with a sort of whimper. But you should have that kind of chance, and I think this is what anybody, I think, in educational theatre has this obligation to challenge the students with, I think.
Let's probably talk a bit about what the role that the university theatre is playing in the community and this sort of thing.
Well, we have been doing, at least beginning last summer, a great deal of extension work. Some of our students got a grant from the government to present workshops in communities throughout the whole province. And others were presenting workshops on campus last summer. And a couple of our students helped to form the Saskatoon Puppet Theatre, which also gave quite a few free performances throughout the city.
One thing I've noticed with the Opportunities for Youth program,
Yes.
that there's a lot of interest in, you know, giving students and whatnot money to, you know, to experiment in, you know, in all sorts of facets of theatre, with strolling players, with the
Yes.
student theatre project and
And
whatnot.
of course, the student theatre project really did a marvellous thing. I think it visited, what, something like 30 towns?
Well, 30 plus something around all the rec units in Saskatoon.
Yes, well, you know, and it exposed maybe a lot of people in Saskatchewan to theatre, and as far as I can gather from those of my students who were in it, and I'm sure that Dan has had the same experience, that the results were just amazing. You know, there's a tremendous amount of interest in theatre in Saskatchewan, and the students gained a lot by it, because they learned, in fact, that they're not just alone, a sort of bunch of freaks just doing theatre, but that people really care about theatre and want to get involved in it, and it does have a direct relationship to the people that are seeing it. But I think they also grew in performance level. I noticed a great change in a lot of students who've taken part in this. They came back into classes in the fall, then they had developed from it.
Just learning how to get on with people was one of the main things. And one of the funny things that happened, well, all the people in most of the towns that we visited were, you know, just really fine people, really nice to talk to and really interested. And this one town, I guess it was Nipawin, it's north, up north. We went up and there was a bit of confusion and whatnot, but even after, you know, the confusion sort of cleared away about different times and stuff, the people were just so keenly interested in what we were doing, and so happy that we you know, we had come just to teach them, you know, the basics, and that's all we were doing, trying to create a basic interest, you know, and this sort of thing.
Of course, this is what theatre can do. Theatre does have a great sort of deal of liveness and a sharing, which no other aspects of the media have, television or radio or film. You know, I mean, they're set, they're dead, they're on tape. But an audience does affect a performance of a play. An audience can, well, I was going to say make or break a play. That isn't totally true. But there are good audiences and there are bad audiences. Audiences are affected by weather. For instance, we at the university play on Sunday evenings, and Sunday evenings are very sticky audiences.
Yes.
And one simply doesn't know whether it's because, you know, they've all had the day off and they've all had good lunches or something, and, you know, they're all sort of relaxed, so they come to the theatre and they just sort of sit there and say, "Well, go on, entertain me." But they're totally different to the Thursday, Friday, Saturday audiences that we have, and it's very interesting to have this sort of contrast. And of course, compositions of audiences change. I mean, sometimes we have largely student audiences, or sometimes we have mixed audiences, sometimes we have community audiences. And each one is different, and this is the really exciting thing about theatre, and I think that anybody who takes part in theatre finds this. It's no performance that you ever do as an actor is the same. It's that kind of adventure, and I think this takes place on all aspects in production. You know, it's always changing. The opinions and ideas are always changing.
I've noticed another thing, the increase in audiences that we've experienced over the last couple of years. That's been largely due to an increase in university students coming to see our productions, and I think this is a very good thing and a healthy indication of a university theatre.
Yeah. I think that a lot of the drama majors and students are going into a lot of varied fields, which I think is sort of helping them, like having a drama, a theatre background, helping them be able to communicate and this sort of thing, going into various
Yes,
backgrounds.
very few of them go actually into careers in the professional theatre, but well, some do, of course. But many of them go into allied fields or fields which are tangentially related to the performing arts. But most of them carry the benefits of a study of drama in a liberal arts college with them when they do go on and work in other fields, editing or
Writing
newspaper
or-
work, writing and the like.
Yes. I think that's pretty well I like to say for today, unless you'd like to add something. I'd like to thank you both very much for being with
Thank
me.
you. Very much.
And thank you. Our revels now are ended. These our players, as I foretold, are but shadows and are vanished into thin air.